Viewers, listeners, welcome to another episode of Blighty Talks Bricks. My guest today is somebody I don't know. We've literally just met, but I know of her, and there's lots of reasons why I know of her. And she's a lady that was in the RAF for over 20 years, helicopter pilot, combat and operational commander, been into various war zones. She's also a mother. That's a tough job on its own. She's a mindfulness coach, something that's close to my heart with anxiety and depression. She's also a best-selling author. She's also a keynote speaker. So you'll probably understand from that introduction why I'm feeling a bit nervous and super excited. So without further ado, Sarah Furness, welcome to Blighty Talks Bricks. How are you?
Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I am great, and I am just as excited and nervous to be here. So,
well, that makes me feel slightly more comfortable. My first question is, why the RAF? I mean, we have various types of the military, but why the RAF?
So, I think it's because I decided from a very young age that I wanted to be a pilot, and that is because of the film Top Gun.
Is it really?
It is. I do.
Most
feel
people
like
just
it.
like a picture of Tom Cruise on the wall.
Yeah, I had a picture of Tom Cruise on the wall. So I just thought it was really cool. And, I was 12, so I didn't have any really sort of profound revelations about serving my country. I just wanted to wear a jacket with patches on it, basically. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I remember saying to my dad, do I look cool? And he went, I could totally see you being a fighter pilot, Sarah. And at that point, I went, that's a good idea, because I was 12, and why not? And I think because my dad was ex-Air Force, he wasn't in anymore, he left when I was a baby. But I suspect that that's what probably, without realising it, influenced my thinking into joining the Air Force. Literally,
just watching that film. I mean, I like the jacket, and I quite like the motorbike, but the thought of getting in anything that went up and have people shoot at me, was you thinking that far ahead at that time?
No, but I think that's the beauty of when you're that age, you can set your dreams really high. And what I think is amazing is it would have been very easy at that point to go, oh, don't be silly, you can't do that. Because at that point, there weren't girls flying fighter planes. Yep. But actually, everyone supported me and went, of course you can. And so it never entered my mind that I couldn't do it. And I think that says a lot, really, about, how we encourage people, because everyone just kind of went, oh, yeah,
jumped
okay,
on
fine,
board with it
go.
and said
yeah.
you can do that.
So
12 years of age, you want to be a fighter pilot, or you want to fly. Mm-hmm. It's not easy, is it? It's not an easy... To join the military, the Navy, the RAF might be easier, but what you wanted to do, that's not easy, is it? And also being a lady.
Yeah, I mean, I think the attrition rate from, selection all the way through flying training, that your chances of making it all the way through to the end of being a frontline fighter pilot, that a lot of people are going to fail at some point along the way. And of course there were no women doing it when I joined or when I made the decision to join. I mean, actually, I will just say the plane doesn't know who's flying it, and it doesn't care either. So it's not actually any more difficult to fly a plane just because you're a woman, but less women were going through the system. So it was more of an unknown quantity for us. And there were things like aptitude, which a lot of women did fail because, dare I say it, maybe women played less video games, and that's quite good practice for that kind of thing. And a lot of women got turned away because of the medical, because they were too small for the aircraft, and you've got to be a certain size to fit into the aircraft. So the odds weren't in your favour, but actually flying the aircraft, if you can get through the selection, the aircraft will actually,
do it.
Not care.
And I get the point. I'm going to ask you a loaded question, I suppose. Because you was a lady, was the system against, not just you being a lady, but against other ladies?
First of all, I don't think I'd ever describe myself as a lady.
You look...
I mean, I tried to be one of those ladettes,
Right, okay.
Not very ladylike. But no, I mean, I really don't. And sometimes I feel a bit sad that this question is still being asked. But I understand why it's being asked. And if anyone has experienced any prejudice because of their gender, that's really crap and it's not okay. And of course, there were people in there that would have had outdated views about women. But I would say the majority of people were actually pretty pro. And I think the Air Force is the best of the services because we're not hired for our strength. I'm not an infantry soldier. It doesn't matter how many bags I can carry on my back. It just matters I can fly a plane. So it was able to be meritocratic because of the job that we did. So I think my main experience was that no one had a bias against me. It was lonely because there were so few girls going through, and that can sometimes play tricks with your mind, and because we all want to be accepted, and because there's so much emphasis around camaraderie in the Air Force and military, there'll be a personal inclination to try and fit in, and it's harder if you're an outlier. But that doesn't mean that the system was against me. It just means that sometimes it's a bit daunting if you're in a minority group.
And you're right. I mean, it is wrong, I suppose, that we asked the question today, but it is something that I think gets talked about. Equality keeps coming up. We read things on the news every day that someone's done this and that and t'other. But I'm always interested because it means you've even achieved even more, because any object in your way is always difficult to overcome. Yeah,
and I don't think it's wrong to ask the question, because if people hadn't asked those questions 20 years ago, I wouldn't be sat in front of you as a helicopter pilot, So we do have to ask these questions. I think sometimes we don't give ourselves credit for how far we've come. So that's why, I make that comment. And I would also say, the common assumption is that it's harder for you if you're in the minority. It's harder for you. You've got to be better than the rest of them to make it as a pilot. But, I'll go back to my previous point. The aircraft doesn't care who's flying it. So you don't have to be better. And by the way, flying training's hard enough as it is without having to be a little bit better than the boys. So I never remember feeling like I had to be better to achieve the same level. I was happy just to be at the level I needed to be.
Well, that's good to hear. We mentioned flying. You were flying helicopters. Mm-hmm. I think I'm right in saying Pumas.
Correct.
How did you get from Tom Cruise to helicopters?
So I did make it into the fast jet training system. So you get streamed fast jet, rotary, multi-engine, and it's sort of a pecking order. And the best ones go fast jet, and then sort of down the rungs of the ladder. So I did make it into the fast jet system, and I actually got quite far, almost through to going on to the conversion unit. So I was flying the Hawk.
Right.
Which is what the Red Arrows fly. So that thing goes at 420 knots, 7 miles a minute.
Right.
I actually did quite well.
That's pretty quick, isn't it?
Yeah, I was quite proud of myself at this point. And so I did quite well, but in the end I failed. Right at the end, right at my final handling test. And lots of people fail on the way through, so it's not unusual for people to fail.
Is that a failure?
Wow.
I don't class it as the word failure.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I think it's marvellous what you're doing if you're driving a tank, but I don't class it as a failure. But maybe, did you look at it as a failure?
Yes, I probably did, but equally I'm not scared of that word anymore. I probably was back then, but I don't think failure in itself...
I've been really good at failures, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. One of the people I follow is Elizabeth Day, and she has a How to Fail podcast, and she says every failure is data acquisition. I.e., you can learn something, you can extract, what's that telling me about what I could do next time? So I do think it was failure, but I don't mind that I failed. Because you have to work really hard to make it through.
Yep.
And I guess think of flying training as a race. You have to get to the required standard before the money runs out, because they've only got so much money they can throw at you. Yep. And I didn't get to the required standard. If they'd given me another 6 months, I probably would have got there, but you've got to draw the line somewhere.
So we're talking about the word failure. Do some people, when they don't make that grade, Top Gun, do they walk away from wanting to fly things? Because you didn't, did you? You said by yourself, you went, I'm not going to say use the word down, but you moved to the next thing.
I think most people who get chopped, as it is, at fast jet would have gone on to a different stream. Because the beauty of being at the top, in inverted commas, is that you've got 2 rungs of the ladder to drop down onto. So I went on to rotary. at which point I went from going at 7 miles a minute to 2 miles a minute. So I had so much capacity.
You've got more time.
And yeah, it's very rare in flying you find things easy, but there was a moment when I went from flying fast jets to helicopters, I was like, I have got all the time in the world. This is amazing. And people would look at me like this. I was like this godlike creature because I'd come from the fast jet world, So actually, it was quite good.
So why Pumas? Do you get pushed into...
It's bums on seats, really.
Is it?
It's where the spaces are. But, I mean, you're going to end up loving what you fly. And I absolutely loved flying the Puma. It's a great aircraft.
So, have I got this right? Pumas, I've watched loads of war films. I've probably watched too many, actually. You're taking in and out troops with some sort of light machinery on?
Yeah, so... Basically, think of us as a battle taxi. So we're not a gunship like the Apache is, where they go in and actually
Do you have guns?
prosecute
Did you have
targets.
guns?
We have guns that poke out the side, which are they are crew-served weapons. So they are shot by a person, like literally like a jimpy.
So you've got somebody
yeah.
hanging out,
Yeah.
as I see it, watching films, hanging out. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And war zones.
Yes.
I'm assuming you've been shot at.
Yes.
Have you been hit?
Not that I know of.
Right. Did you ever get back and think, wow, that's a dent there, and I didn't do that parking, did I?
I have got back and seen some dents in the helicopter, but it wasn't because I was shot at.
Right, okay. You hit something.
Yes.
Are you supposed to do that?
No.
Oh, right.
No.
Okay.
But it does happen.
Does it?
Yes.
What, because it's dark, you can't see, or
Yeah.
it's foggy, and you're military, it's not as though it's a commercial trip where we're saying, well, we're not going up today because the weather's not good.
Right, so, our job is to, if you're doing casualty evacuation, particularly if it's the army, they love training in crap weather. So, at the time when you're most needed to go and get someone off a hill, it's probably going to be the worst weather possible. Just to be clear, we don't make a habit of dinking helicopters, but, I was being quite sort of cavalier about that. But I have had a few.
Fear.
Yes.
I would absolutely crap myself if I had to go into a war zone, let alone get in a helicopter. When I watch films, they don't seem to be scared. Was you ever fearful? Was you ever scared? Did you ever think, I don't want to do this today?
Of course. I mean, I think the worst kind of fear is not the in-the-moment fear, because we're actually trained so well in kind of peacetime that actually when you do get shot at, you've got that initial moment of, oh my God. I mean, in fact, the first time I got shot at, I genuinely thought it was fireworks. Because your brain can't quite compute that someone is shooting at you and trying to kill you. And you're like, what? And then you kind of realise, and then the training just kicks in. So actually, because you're focusing on flying the aircraft, you don't really have space for fear, because you can only really focus on one thing at a time. So that's not the fear that frightens me the most. It's the lying awake at night fear. That's the one that I think, the anxiety. And that's the, am I a good mum? What will people say about me if I don't come home? That kind of stuff. And actually, in a way, I think we can channel that fear, because that gave me a huge perspective that not many people have in their 20s, to realise, be a bit nicer to your parents, because you'd be really annoyed if the last thing you said to them was a really dickish thing, right? Yeah. Doesn't always work, so I still forgot that. And you would write your will, and you'd write letters, to your friends before you deployed, and it really made you think about what was important. And actually, in a way, that fear was a gift, because fear is telling you something's important to you.
Fear, yeah, but I see it differently. You're obviously, I'm going to ask it, you're obviously a leader, because you don't become a commander, you don't become an operational commander, you've got people looking at your colleagues, your peers. Did you know that from a young age you was a leader? Or can you become a leader?
So the more that I learn and understand about leadership, the more I think that you become and learn. And one of my big things is that, very few things are completely instinctive. There will, of course, be some instinct. There will, of course, be some natural advantage. And, that's why it makes sense to play to your strengths. But that's a baseline, and then you build on that baseline. I'm sure David Beckham was naturally quite good at football, but he didn't get to the standard he did by sitting on his, bedroom floor. So I think what helped me become a leader is I put myself into leadership positions from a young age. I joined the Air Cadets when I was 12, and they put you into leadership positions. I was a prefect at school. And I think probably just having the confidence and being raised to be confident by my parents allowed me to start practicing leadership from a very young age. If you've been leading from 12, it's no surprise that if you join the military, age 21, you might have a few ideas about how to lead. So I think a lot of it is just getting out there and starting.
You talked about the word confidence. I know it's true because I saw you talk about it. You had a challenge with your arms. I mean, the story, please tell the listeners. I actually thought, have I just heard that correctly?
Yes, so as I mentioned, a lot of women don't make it through selection because we're too small.
Yeah.
And you've got, your legs have got to be a certain length so you can reach the pedals, and your arms have got to be a certain length so you can reach the controls. And, I guess they don't measure the aircraft to the people, they measure the people to the aircraft. It's cheaper that way, right? And my arms were too short.
So when somebody tells you your arms are too short, that's sort of the end of the conversation, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it would have been. I was fortunate in that I'd already been through the year before to apply for a sixth form scholarship to get me through the last 2 years of school. And then I went back to apply again for university. But it's exactly the same aptitude, leadership tests, medical tests. So I thought, this is in the bag, right? I'm going to get this. And it was at that moment they said, you failed the pilot medical. And I remember I was really puzzled. I was like, I don't understand. I passed last year. And he said, no, sorry, your arms are too short. And I went, but they can't be. They were fine last year. I remember he sort of sighed. He took his glasses off and he went, let me put this in really clear language. You will never be a pilot. And I went, okay. Went away, had a little cry in the loo, went home. And they sent the 2 reports. And my arms had indeed shrunk 4 centimetres. And I was like, that can't be right. Luckily, I also had a very tenacious mother. So she said, right, even on the last year's one, you're still a little bit short, but you're not as short as they think. So we've still got to work out how to stretch your arms, but you need to get on the phone.
Stretch your arms?
Yes. So she set about doing that. We got a personal trainer, which didn't exist back then, but we got a personal trainer to work out how do you get your arms to be 3 millimetres longer or whatever it was that I needed to be. And then I basically rang the RAF every 2 weeks for 6 months going, you've made a mistake, please will you remeasure me? And after 6 months, they got thoroughly bored of me and said, fine, come back and get remeasured. By which point, I'd been doing these physio exercises, basically.
You're not walking around with a dumbbell, every dumbbell we're just stretching you.
Yeah, so this is the common kind of misconception. Actually, you just want to increase the flexibility in your shoulder, so because you know how like bouncers, because they work out, their arms are like that, and that actually makes their arms shorter. So actually, you want to do the opposite and make your kind of the fluidity in your shoulder really fluid, I guess.
So that's how committed you were to this ambition, isn't it? I mean, that's taken having a picture of Tom Cruise on the wall to the next dimension to make your arms longer.
Yeah. It is, and bearing in mind as well, at this point, well, I suppose I had done a bit of flying by that point, so I guess I'd caught the bug. Yeah. And I think that does help. But I think also it's testament to how powerful it is just having a goal. Because there's larger life lessons there, which is don't give up, have good support around you, all that kind of stuff. So even if I hadn't made it, that would have still helped me develop as a human being. But yeah, I think I think being committed and focused and determined has never been a problem for me.
Obviously not. Yeah, obviously not. I mean, my legs are too short. I'm going to try and do something about them later on. Why did you leave the RAF? Because you obviously loved it. Obviously very successful. What made you say, I've had enough?
Well, I mean, I did 21 years, which I think is a pretty good stint. And it feels sort of slight heresy to say this, but even flying gets a bit samey after 21
Does
years.
It? Okay.
So, not every pilot feels this way. Lots of pilots, when they leave the Air Force, continue flying. I'm not one of them. I had kind of done enough by that point. And I used to pray for bad weather days. And there will be some pilots watching this who will be nodding along at this point going, yep, when you have that secret hope that the airfield's, the runway's going to be black or you can't fly. And I remember one of my male colleague pilots even said this and said, actions on, this was the briefing point where we're about to walk out to the aircraft, and he said, actions on the airfield becoming black. And he said, suppress the urge to whoop and go to the bar, kind of thing. So we all, not all of us, but a few of us did feel that kind of...
Yeah, I can see
there's some other stuff I could do rather than fly. And I think also, you're always under pressure because you could always do better. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think pressure is a privilege, but it does get tiring after a while, being on your A game every day. So for all of those reasons, I wasn't that gutted to have a change of scenery. I was ready to change.
So you was ready to change. Did you know what you were going to do?
Well, I had this epiphany by discovering mindfulness. I didn't discover mindfulness, by the way. It was already there, but, I discovered it for myself. And, I'd been through some of my own ups and downs in life and realised that it's not a fairy tale and good people do bad things and good people get hurt and all those kind of things. And I didn't really know how to deal with it, but I knew I'd always been quite an emotional person, and discovered at sort of the age of 36, I didn't really like myself very much. So what do you do?
I'm 60, by the way, I've still got it.
Yeah, I know. This is, and I get it, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. And that's why I talk about it as well, because you assume that if you don't like yourself, it's because you're unlikable, right? Or I did.
Yeah.
And then mindfulness helped me to realise that that's just a narrative you have in your head, and you can attach meaning to that and go, well, therefore I'm a monster. Or you can see that that's just...
But how did that epiphany that came, how did you then decide, I'm going to do something about this, not only for yourself, but I'm going to do it for other people, which I have to say I'm halfway through. And the reason I'm halfway through is because I have to keep going back. So I'm halfway through your first book.
Yeah, okay.
But how did you know that you had something there that you could get that message across? Because that's quite a special gift as well.
Because a couple of really good friends of mine got caught out as well, and they went through a really, really bad time. And I realised, Sarah, get off the Me channel. Like, you're not the only one that finds life hard. And they were people in the military. And I realised a lot of us were putting a brave face on stuff. And kind of thought, well, look, it's not just me. And actually, I've got some tools here. And I feel like if they knew about this stuff, it might help them.
So you're obviously very clever. You've had lots of experiences, good and bad. You feel that by talking to some friends that you can see that there's some help out there that you can give other people. How do you get from that? You sit in your kitchen, you've got a cup of coffee in your hand, you've got this idea. How do you get it to, not even to where it is today, what's the next step for you to actually, how do you get people on board with that?
I think it's kind of one of those moments where you jump out the aircraft and I really hope you've got a parachute attached to you.
I wouldn't jump out of an aircraft, trust me, unless it was going down, then I would jump. But
I mean, if you've seen how many aircraft I've crashed, you'd probably jump out of mine.
Would I really? Well, you're still here and you're still walking, other than your arms are a bit short, you're perfect.
Maybe my talent's crashing though, not actually. Anyway, I think I started talking about, I started training as a mindfulness coach because I decided I was going to leave the Air Force. And, started talking about it with friends. And then a friend emailed me one day and said, how much would it cost for you to come in and run a mindfulness workshop? And I went, shit, I don't know, how much would it cost? So I suddenly kind of came up with this proposal. And then I thought, well, they're going to need a website. They're going to need to know who I am. So then I just threw a website up, posted my first blog, and went, well, it's gone live. And that was it. That was me kind of laying the track as I was going. Kind of fortunately, COVID then hit, so I was still in the military at this point. But my job was teaching air safety at that point, which meant we went online at that point.
Okay.
So I was able to sort of twin track, and I started running well-being courses online just for the military, for the MOD. And I was able to kind of test my product and sort of gain a bit of traction and gain a bit of confidence that I actually had some value to offer. And then it kind of just snowballs from there. Then you go on LinkedIn. When you're in the military, you're like, what is this thing called LinkedIn?
Yep.
But you start building your audience and going, hey, this is what I do. And kind of think of it as like being a beacon of light. You become more visible to people that need what you're offering.
Yeah.
And then bit by bit, things start coming in and they start going, I really liked what you said about this. Would you come and talk to our team about it?
So when you're doing it online, you feel, I'm getting the impression you feel a bit comfortable because it's military orientated. Did you have knockbacks then? Did you come off and think, I don't know, I only had a few people listen. I didn't think I came across as well as I want. Or does that not come in because you're mindfulness, because you've had big experiences of things behind you?
Yeah.
Do you just actually sort of, that's not going to bother me, I'm just going to crack on?
Oh, no, I a bit of both, I think. I think the military does make you quite resilient, and because I'd got mindfulness and I'd learnt about, fear of rejection, fear of failure, all those things really help because you need those things in spades when you're running a business, right? Well, just living a life, okay? So yeah, I think that did help. I was petrified of putting myself out there, and I was really scared of what people in the military would think, because I thought they'd go, I'm talking about leadership now. And there are people, again, who might be watching this podcast who I have led, and I'm thinking, they're going to be thinking, who is she to talk about leadership? She was a nightmare. And someone's going to get on LinkedIn and go, look, I know what she was like. She was terrible. So I was very afraid of putting myself out there in front of the military. But then I thought, but they're not my client, really, and they can think and say what they like. I hope I'm always respectful to them and about them. But ultimately, in the world of business, it doesn't really matter what people think about you if they're not your clients. Well, that's how I kind of had to compartmentalize it, I suppose.
So your online stuff was working. You were growing in confidence, more followers. Fly Higher,
yes.
First book.
Yeah.
You've heard these words, but best-selling author. Wow, that's impressive, isn't it? That is impressive. So, training the brain. I mean, I've still got to find it. I'm that scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz. I've still got to find if I've got one of them. But training the brain. I mean, how do you get all this stuff down into a book? We've got both of them sitting on the desk here. But how do you get that down? I mean, writing a book's not easy, is it?
So the pivot happened because, as you sort of said at the start, mindfulness can be quite a hard sell to some people. And the sort of people that I was hoping to attract and work with are the people that would be least like to seek out mindfulness, in my view. So it was a hard sell to start with, and that's where the pivot happened to speaking. Because actually one of my first clients was actually a boxer, and I remember he came to me and said, I want you to teach me mindfulness so that I can stay calm when I get punched in the face. That's what he said to me, and I thought, how am I going to teach you about this? And he said, but you've been shot at. You've been, in helicopter crashes. You must know how to do this stuff. And I thought, I do know how to do it, but I don't know why I know. And it was the mindfulness training that allowed me to go back through all of my military career and go, right, that's why that worked, and that's why that worked. So I was able to, then I realized, actually, people are seeking me out not for my mindfulness, but because of my military experience. That's the thing that's selling me.
Yeah, I can get that.
Yeah. So then I started telling military stories, but I was weaving mindfulness through all of the stories. So one of the stories I tell is about hitting wires in Morocco, and there's a moment where I'm daydreaming about death, which is the worst thing to be thinking about in that moment.
So you are flying a helicopter? And you hit some wires, sort of pylon, electric cables?
Flew through some wires, yeah.
Okay.
The wires snapped, the canopy shatters. I'm basically now flying a convertible helicopter. The air's rushing in, and I'm thinking, oh right, I'm going to die. And
is that the first thing that comes? You actually go, I'm going to die now.
Yeah. And I actually remember kind of feeling oddly comforted that it would be a quick death. I thought, well, there's a sort of peaceful moment where you go, I don't know if you're scared of death, but I am. And I thought, well, it'd probably be quite quick at least. At least I now know what's coming. Like it's the sort of that moment of certainty. We go, well, there could be worse ways to go, and it'd be quite dramatic as well.
Yeah, would have made the news.
It would have made the news. So, and I was in my early 20s, and it was all about that. And I was thinking, yeah. Anyway, but I'm thinking all these things, which is obviously, whilst I'm thinking about that, I'm not flying the aircraft, which is not very helpful. But every pilot knows that we have a mantra, fly the aircraft. And that was the moment I kind of went, oof. And I sort of came to, sorry, I keep doing that. So I kind of came to, realised wow, the aircraft's still flying. And then got back to flying the aircraft, focused on just that, landed the aircraft, and then smoked every cigarette I could steal from anyone who was close by. But that was a kind of epiphany, because that's really mindfulness. You know, when your brain starts self-sabotaging or going into places that aren't really helping you. And with mindfulness, you train yourself to refocus on your breath. And mindfulness is about focusing your attention somewhere where it serves you in the moment, and recognizing you will be distracted all of the time. That's not a design flaw, that's just how humans are. But you don't need to stay distracted. You can bring your attention back to something that serves you in that moment. And that's what Fly the Aircraft is.
When I was reading Fly Higher, there was one of the things in there, and I run a business, I suppose that makes me a leader in a strange way. I always thought it was important that I could multitask, and that I should have 6 things on the go.
Yes.
A bit like a chef in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I went back a few times to that, because I thought, you're right and I'm wrong. That's probably why I've cocked up a number of times, because I'm a bloke and we can only do one thing at a time anyway. But I mean, I used to think as a leader, you need to be having 5, 6, 7. And equally, that was quite exciting for me as a person, because I get bored quickly.
Yeah, yes.
But actually, and I went back over that and read that a number of times to think, are you right? But I actually do believe you're right. And I now wish, if I look back, I think, do you know what? I've put that into play in certain things, and I'm thinking I could have dealt with that better.
Right.
And part of the reason is because I was irritable because I was doing A, and B had come up, and C had come up, and I wasn't ready for B or C.
Yeah.
But actually, the bottom line was, I can only do one thing, and we can all only do one thing, really, at a time.
Yes.
But it shook me.
Yeah, and to be honest, the penny didn't drop for me for a long time as well. I remember early on, so same as you, right? Pilots expect themselves to be able to multitask. There is even an aptitude test called the multitasking test. So the Air Force thought we had to multitask, right? I'm a mother, I'm a woman. All of these things that make us wear multitasking like a badge of honor. So, like you, I was like, I can multitask. And I remember really early on in flying training, this guy made a throwaway comment. He said, you can't actually multitask, you can only task switch. And I dismissed it at the time. Funnily enough, he went on to be a Harrier pilot, so he obviously knew what he was talking about.
But he can only go up and down, though.
So can a helicopter, don't be mean. But he'd obviously figured it out, and actually what matters is being more intentional. It doesn't say that you have to have tunnel vision and focus on one thing for the rest of your life. Obviously, you can't do that in an aircraft. You've got to fly the aircraft.
You're doing things quickly.
You are task switching, which you could argue is multitasking, but we have a work cycle to make sure that we're doing it methodically and not doing it how most people multitask, which is just in a bit of a frenzy. And equally, unless you're flying at 140 miles an hour, I suggest you don't task switch that often. Try and focus on something for 10 minutes and then you'll do better work. So it took me a little while to figure all this out. And again, it was kind of mindfulness to help me connect all the dots and go back through military and go, fly the aircraft. We did that because you could only focus on one thing. And what fly the aircraft means is focus on the one thing that matters most right now, because you can only focus on one thing at a time. So again, we were, I didn't make sense of that until years after.
I'm not into book 2. The uni-tasking. I'm not into it yet. I will get into it, because I'm still doing book 1. Did that become easier to do the second book, or does it become harder? So
I wrote the first book when my business was still starting out. So I wasn't, fighting off business at that point. I still had some fairly big quiet periods. And also, I wrote that book because I had something to say, and it flowed out of me. And it was really like, the first book was like, here's what I want to say to the world. The second book was kind of the world, very grandiose, saying, we've heard what you've said, this is what we're saying back. So I was responding more to what people were saying to me.
Okay.
So it wasn't what I wanted to say, it's what other people wanted to hear.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I think that's a kind of better book, because it's serving my audience and I'm listening to what they're saying. Because what came out of book 1 was exactly what you've just picked up on. Chapter 2, I think it is, Stop Multitasking. And I now give a speech which is all about that. But lots of people very reasonably say, I love the concept. It makes complete sense when you say it, but how do I put it into practice? Because how do I prioritize? Or what do I do when I get distracted because I get easily bored? Or, how do I deal with a demanding boss? Or will I lose customers if I don't answer their inquiries straight away? So there's so many questions. So that very simple concept throws up so many more questions, and that deserved another book. So the second book is the answer to all the questions that I got, to take people through a step-by-step process of how can I actually start implementing this into my daily life.
Well, your first book, you'll hate me for this, I keep writing all my pen comments on it. Yeah. Because I have to keep... It's becoming a reference book, which is, for me, people who know me have said that they're even surprised I read. But it is interesting. I want to just take you on because you're getting a really good reputation for being a keynote speaker. You enjoy that?
I love it.
No shyness, no different audience, different kind of people sitting in the audience?
So, yes. And this is where, people often say, do you miss flying? No, because actually there's still pressure to perform in the keynote world. When you go onto a stage and there's 400 people looking at you, and you make your first joke and you get blank face and you think, oh.
Done that loads of time with 10 people, let alone 400.
Exactly. So it's a different kind of pressure. And I do actually get shy. Weirdly, on a stage, I'm less shy because you're just sort of looking into the lights. When I'm in a group of 10 or 20 people, when I'm mingling beforehand, I'm really shy, actually. I don't really want to talk to them. And everyone's so pleased to see you. And you think, God, I'm going to just say something really boring here. So, yeah, I think it still affects you. And I think the day that it doesn't probably is the day I have to retire, because I really think that's an important thing. It means you care. It means you're taking it seriously. That little bit of sweet spot of uncomfortableness, I think, is where you do your best work. So I think it's important that you feel all those things. But I do love it because A, it does keep me on my A game, and B, the beauty of storytelling is that everybody can recognise themselves in that story, and they'll come back and tell you what it meant to them, and that gives you a whole new perspective on, old idea but new perspective, and that is how the ideas evolve. That's how I keep growing and learning now, because I'm learning from all these people that I would never have met otherwise. If I'd stayed in the Air Force, I would never have met these people.
Do you like people? I don't.
I'm more cat than dog, I would say. I like one-to-one. Yeah. I'm not great in groups, and I can be secretly quite antisocial. I like humans, if that makes sense.
I love lovely humans.
Yeah, and I've got a huge amount of respect for humanity. I think the human brain's an amazing thing. Sometimes I struggle with people.
Well, it's interesting because I've got a guy that came on, an ex-rugby player. He came on and he said on the podcast that when he walks into a room with lots of people, he feels his energy levels go down. And he prefers one-on-one.
Yeah.
When I say I don't like people, I don't like big groups of people, but it's interesting, my personality goes the other way. Right. So my energy levels go, even though I'm sitting there thinking, I don't particularly want to be here, I don't particularly want to be doing. But it is interesting how the mind works differently on that.
Yeah, definitely.
So just before we wrap up, I said to you that things go quickly. Is there something that you could give to the listeners of Blighty Talks Bricks, or the people that watch, 1 or 2 points where if they suffer from anxiety, if they're feeling a little bit under pressure, not flying helicopters, maybe walking on in we had a family wedding and one of the family members said to me, I'm really nervous, I've got to do a speech, I'm really nervous. And I was just like, well, why would you be nervous? Because you're lovely. Is there any sort of little little things to help people just get over that?
Yeah.
We use the word, don't we? Take a deep breath.
Yeah. Well, it does work. The breathing, because when you slow down your breathing, it does actually send a signal to your brain that the sort of threat has passed. So annoyingly, when people say, just take a deep breath, there actually is science behind that. I think the one thing I would say is it's very easy to beat yourself up for feeling an emotion, and and we're, exactly. If you don't mind me picking up on, you said, but why would you be nervous?
No, absolutely.
Right. And actually, what that is saying is that you're wrong to feel that way. And we do it with our children. When a child cries, we go, "Don't cry," because we don't like seeing our child
my
under
mum
stress.
used to say, "If you keep crying, I'll give you something to cry about in a minute."
And that too, right? That too. But what we are doing from a young age is we're telling people that their emotions aren't valid, and then we're creating this shame around feeling that emotion. And weirdly, you would think that would drive it away, but actually it just sort of shouts a bit louder and goes, no, but I'm trying to protect you. We feel anxious, we feel fear to try and protect us from a threat. So if we shame ourselves and go, well, don't feel like that, it goes, no, I'm trying to help you, that's what your brain is doing, right? So I think that the biggest thing that I learned was acceptance, like sitting with your emotion and going, it's okay to feel like this. It's also okay that I don't like feeling like this, but this is an emotion and I can tolerate this emotion. So rather than not feeling an emotion, it's increasing your confidence to sit with that emotion. And that's chapter 5 of my book, by the way. And I call that distress tolerance. I think that is probably the thing that really turned things around for me, is rather than beating myself up or trying to feel something different, giving yourself 30 seconds to give the emotion the respect it deserves. And then you can say, right, pull yourself together, go do whatever you have to do. Put your brave pants on, superhero pose, whatever it is that you need to do. But give yourself that 30 seconds to be kind to yourself about how you feel.
So it's not bad to feel that way at all?
Not at all.
And it is interesting because we do beat ourselves up, don't we? Sarah, I'm going to grab these books. It's taken me a long time to get through this one because of my problems. I'm looking forward to getting to this. Sarah, thank you very much for your time. Before you came, I said I was nervous. On here. You put me at ease immediately. It's lovely that you found the time to come on. Thank you very much. Good luck with the second book.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed your company.
Likewise.
Viewers, listeners, we come to another end of another Blighty Talks Bricks. I knew I'd get Tom Cruise on this show somehow, some way, and we've managed to do it. I hope you've enjoyed our time. I've really enjoyed sitting and talking to Sarah. Take care. Stay safe.